The CEO of a major company sits in a restaurant and he's having a board meeting. It's during this meeting he begins to display some horrible behaviours. A 15-year-old hacker sits across from a company he is attempting to extort money from. He's telling them he can bring this company down. A group of young Conservative voters get drunk and they bring a girl back to their house where they abuse her. A taxi driver talks about what it's actually like working on the streets driving a taxi. Now, these are all good stories, but are they true? Because here's the thing about stories. Often they have a way of becoming something else, something a bit twisted. Sometimes everything needs facts checked. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? You well? Are you good? I am. Alrighty, couple of little things just before we got on with the story. Thank you very, very, very much if you were one of the people who voted for me in Podcast Magazine Hot 50 Podcasts in June and managed to help me secure number 7 on the charts. So that's lovely. Thank you very much. And secondly, you are just keeping coming with your old phrases that are out of date. And at the end of the episodes, I'm just going to say it again. You're slightly taking the piss out of me here, some of you. You're sending me phrases that you're just making them up now. You're just making things up. There's no way some of these exist. But we'll get to that at the end. We'll get on with the story. But to just use one of those slightly outdated phrases, buckle up, buttercup. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. Alright, Stephen Glass was born in 1972. What a great year. So, he was born in Chicago and in quite an affluent part of Chicago. Born to his parents, his mum was a nurse and his dad was a gastroenterologist. Is that how you say it? A doctor who basically specialises in sort of stomach related things. Both successful, a wealthy family, and he would go on, Stephen, to attend Highland Park High School. Now, Highland Park High School, just to give you a clear picture of that, this is the kind of place where people who are going to succeed in the world go and study. This is the kind of place where your future CEOs and your future kind of producers and writers and big people who are going to earn big money, that's the kind of school that this was. And that was very, very, very much what the Glass family was like. The children were very much raised to become successful you were going to be wealthy, you were going to do well in the world, okay? There was no option that you were just going to like choose something you wanted to do. No, you were going to become a doctor or a lawyer or something like a CEO of a company. Now, that obviously, of course, straight away presents itself an issue. Because if you're born into that and the expectation is placed on you at a very, very young age that you're going to succeed, you're going to do all these things, you have to be an achiever of sorts, and naturally, well, it's a bit dangerous to place that onto people, because then if you're suddenly forced to think, shit, I have to really be an achiever in life, often people try and find ways to cut corners in that. So here is Stephen, and as he's growing up, his family are telling him, this is the plan. You're going to go to university, you're going to get a really good degree that's either law or medicine, something in those lines. And that's what he does. He goes to Pennsylvania University and he starts a course in medicine. But here is the problem. He hates it. He doesn't like it at all. Given that he's been pushed into it by his parents, that's understandable. Now, he continues with the course, but again, he's just not that engaged with it. He's not that excited by it. But there is one thing about sort of university life that Stephen Glass likes, and that is the newspaper office. So they've got this really good newspaper office that produces the university newspaper, and he wants to really get in there. He wants to get himself involved in that world, and so what he does is he starts to just sort of hang around the office. He tries to kind of make himself useful, find any sort of little jobs he can. Someone needs a coffee. Oh, here's Stephen. He'll make you a coffee. That kind of thing. He starts to try and make friends, and it's all these little tiny small jobs that lead up to him actually getting a sort of job, if you will, within it. And that is to proofread some of the articles and to do a bit of fact checking. So he just needs to sort of look over articles and be like, okay, is that source definitely right? Okay, blah, 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 check names against dates, etc., etc. So that's great. So he's quite happy because he's not really very happy in his studies, but now he's got this little job and he's thinking, this is good. But is this good enough for Stephen Glass? Well, no, because remembering what I just said about his family, if you're going to do anything, you're going to do it and be the best at it. You're going to succeed in it. Now, it doesn't take long for Stephen to start getting a bit of confidence about himself within the newspaper office, and what he does is he starts to pitch ideas for articles to the staff in the office, and he gets himself a real reputation as a go-getter. Go-getter, what a fucking awful phrase that is. Why did I use that? But you know what I mean. Go-getter actually does do the job of summing up what I'm trying to say, but a bulk, what a terrible phrase. Anyway, yeah, he's got this real kind of like, people are like, wow, Stephen's ambitious. Like, he keeps coming up with ideas for things the newspaper could focus on, could write about. And something great's going to happen here for Stephen Glass, which is that the editor and other reporters, they decide to take a bit of a chance on him, and they say, actually, okay, yes, some of your ideas are really good. Why don't you just go ahead and write these articles? Just go ahead, we'll have a look at them, and we'll see what we think, and if they're any good, we'll publish them. So he does. Starts to write a few pieces, and they're good. They're really, really good. And here is specifically what is good about Stephen Glass's articles, and this is why his story becomes the story that it becomes. He has a real knack for looking at an issue. So he'll take like a big, huge political issue or something that's not being spoken about, And what he's brilliant at is finding a real person to look at in a way to look at the bigger issue. Does that make sense? So, I suppose in a way that I do sometimes with the podcast, which is if I want to look at a bigger thing, I'll tell it through the story of a person. And what we actually hang on to is the really human bit of that person's story in order to talk about the bigger thing. Think about I'm trying to think of a recent one. Lip dip paint. So, for example, when I did that story, about that absolutely horrendous chemical that was killing people, actually, in a way, I could have just told you the story, but by telling you about the people who were actually really involved in it and how it affected their lives, you connect to the story. So that's essentially how podcasting works. It's essentially how writing works. I realise, what's that really, really old phrase, don't teach your granny to suck eggs? I realise I've essentially just explained to you how newspaper articles work and how podcasting works. Brilliant, well done, Barry. I didn't mean that to be patronising in the slightest. But yeah, that's the kind of thing that he was doing, and people were really impressed. They were like, wow, he seems to get to these great sources who are right at the heart of these issues, which is absolutely brilliant. So these sort of articles that he's putting out there, they start to get noticed by people. And they start to get noticed outside of the University of Pennsylvania. And a magazine called The New Republic spots some of Stephen Glass's articles. I have to say, The New Republic is not a magazine that I'm familiar with. I don't know it. I mean, my magazine speed is more things like Take a Break, Chat magazine, the kind of things that have like headlines like my ghost husband remarried my neighbour, those kind of things. Do you know what I mean? That's more my kind of speed. I like a bit of that. And I mean, this was what, mid-90s, so yeah, what would I have been reading? Smash Hits magazine. Maybe if you're outside of the UK, you might not know what Smash Hits was, but basically it was like the biggest pop magazine. Oh my god, every Friday it came out. Yes, it was so good. 1994. Yeah, going into teenage years, and well, then my magazine interests changed entirely, but we don't need to talk about that. Okay, so so the New Republic, right? They're big. This is a big publication, and at age 24, the editor calls Stephen one day and says, I would really like to take you on freelance to write a big piece for us. And Stephen is majorly excited. For him, this is brilliant. He's like, okay, great, I'll do it. Tell me what it's about. And the editor says it's about taxi driving. Okay. Not necessarily the sexiest of topics, but okay. It's an attempt to look at people who work in the taxi industry, and maybe there's something interesting in that. So, off he goes. He starts his research. What he does is he talks to different taxi drivers, and he gets their different life stories, bits and pieces. He pulls it all together, and eventually he produces a piece of work called Taxis and the Meaning of Work. And he introduces us in this article to a man called Edward Murdoch, who is a taxi driver and who talks about, how it's a changing world in America. It used to be this really low-class job, and now there's slightly more respect for it, and how much money can you make from it, and, but there's still a kind of level of snobbery around it. People look down on it. He gets into the heart of all of this. The article is online. You can find the article. It's called Taxis and the Meaning of Work. So he's really captured this sort of Edward character and brought him to life. Now, people love this article when it comes out. When this is published, people love it. And his bosses love it. At the New Republic magazine, they're like, wow, this is great. And it's easy to see why, because, he makes you care. So the success of this one article, it's going to make the next few years of Stephen Glass's life very, very interesting indeed. He's asked by the magazine if he can write more, and he does so. And now he starts to swing from topic to topic, and his writing just gets better. And I suppose what other journalists around him, his kind of contemporaries, are starting to do is go, wow, it is amazing that at every turn, no matter what subject, no matter what topic you give him, he's really able to find the people at the very heart of that thing. And people are like, wow, this is incredible skill. You know, you could ask him to basically write about anything. You could say, go and write a piece, Stephen Glass, about, I don't know, cherry picking in South Dakota. And within days, he would be able to, produce an article with a real cherry picker, a real person who was there at the heart of it. And what he does with this kind of power that he's developing when he's starting to put these articles out is he starts looking at things like some of the Bill Clinton rallies that were happening at the time. He tries to sort of get to the underbelly of certain issues and almost moves towards exposing people, exposing sort of issues that maybe people aren't talking about. You know, he'll manage to take an issue and find the kind of maybe the sex and the debauchery that's going on underneath it that people maybe aren't aware of. And I suppose, it's interesting with Stephen Glass's story to keep remembering this thing about expectations. You know, this guy who was going to one day be a doctor, who was going to one day, be this huge success. At the moment, this is happening for him. Okay, it's not happening in the way that his parents imagined it would happen. It's not Mr. and Mrs. Glass had very different ideas. You know, their son was going to become either a doctor or a lawyer. Wasn't going to be a journalist. But here he is. He's doing fairly well with it. And at the moment, they're kind of okay with this. They're all right with it. Because their basic ethos is this. If you are going to do it, be the best at it. You know, it's the equivalent of if you're going to be a pop star, be Beyonce. If you're going to be a photographer, be David LaChapelle. If you're going to be a TV host, be Oprah. Do you know what I mean? It's this idea, like, be the best. But here's the problem. When you're under pressure to succeed, you need to keep getting better, and that process can only lead to you having to really find inventive ways to be the best. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly is extraordinary here about Stephen Glass's story? And it's a good question. But it's this thing that I'm talking about. It's this need for success, because at this point Stephen sets out and decides he's going to become the biggest major journalistic success he can be. He's seeing Pulitzer Prizes in his future for journalism. And what happens now in the real world for him outside of this imagined life is that other magazines start coming to him. So things like Rolling Stone magazine, Harper's magazine, they're all coming to him and they're saying, look, will you consider writing pieces for us? Now let's introduce into the story a man called Michael Kelly. He's the new editor at the New Republic, so he essentially becomes the boss of Stephen. Now, is Michael Kelly a popular man? No, he's not. He's known as a man who ruffles a lot of feathers. He's not afraid to kind of shake things up. So when he takes over the magazine, essentially a lot of people are like, oh fuck, this guy, he's a bloody nightmare. He's always in an argument about something, he shouts a lot, he's really like, oh, what a nightmare. But one thing that Michael Kelly does really, really like is he really likes Stephen Glass's articles. He's a big fan. And that feeling is actually mutual because Stephen really likes Michael. The two of them, they have this kind of like bond together. And again, what that comes from is that Michael Kelly will say, Stephen Glass just writes these incredible articles, and how he's constantly able to put himself at the centre of these stories is just incredible. He's really honed that skill. It is amazing when you read some of the Stephen Glass things, because no matter where in the world it's happening, no matter who it involves, he seems to just always be there at the right time, in the right place. And this is where this story will take a massive gear change. Stephen Glass goes to his new boss, Michael Kelly, and he says, what would be excellent here, what would be fantastic for me, is if you allowed me to start going undercover. And I could really go undercover, and I could start to expose corruption, and I could really get into the heart of companies, groups of people. And Michael Kelly, he agrees to this. So Michael Kelly can really see the sort of exciting journalistic kind of potential here, because he's thinking, great, if I can get my young journalist undercover, get him right into the heart of corruption, brilliant. We're going to get some brilliant articles out of this. So one of the first things that Stephen Glass turns up is an article about a company they're a massive major company, and they deal with health and hygiene of food preparation. And they happen to be having a board meeting, and they're in a restaurant, and at the very centre of this meeting is the CEO, and he's this well-respected businessman. Now, Stephen Glass is sitting at a table nearby, and it's during this board meeting in the restaurant, Stephen Glass witnesses some terrible behaviour. He sees the CEO essentially being a bully. He sees him being rude, aggressive, sexist, racist, all of these worst, horrible human qualities. And so, what does Stephen Glass do? Well, he writes an exposé. He writes an article about it. And the editor loves this. He's like, brilliant. From here, Stephen Glass goes next to a Young Conservatives rally. And it's while he's here, he goes undercover as a Young Conservative. And it's here that he witnesses a group of young voters, and he describes in his article that he writes about them that they are drunk, that they are taking drugs, and that there's a group of 8 men who bring a young woman back to their room so that they can sexually humiliate her. Now, between the piece about the CEO and the piece about the Young Conservative voters, when these are published, they're huge successes. I mean, these are like flying off the shelves. You know, people really want to read these because they're like, here's a journalist who's able to get right into the belly of the beast. It's not long after both articles are published that Michael Kelly calls Stephen into his office, and Michael Kelly says, look, I have a problem here. I've been contacted by the company who were having the meeting in the restaurant, and I've been contacted by the group of Young Conservatives who you went undercover with, and they're both saying the same thing to me. They're saying that your articles are full of mistakes. They're saying the behaviour you described from that CEO in the restaurant just didn't really happen. And they're saying that this talk of a group of men being drunk, taking drugs and bringing a young girl back to their room, it just never happened. And Stephen Glass says this, look, sometimes I have to add a bit of flavour. Sometimes I have to embellish. And Michael Kelly says, yes, but you're a reporter. You're not a fiction writer. It's pretty serious to accuse a group of 8 men of essentially sexual assault when actually you've just sort of made that up. And Stephen Glass tries to say, look, it's not about, making things up. It's just that maybe I take something slightly that I observe and I build upon it for the article. Actually, what Stephen Glass does here is he manipulates his boss, Michael Kelly, who's a big, powerful man. He manipulates him into saying, look, it's just ambition. I just want my stories to be the best. I just want my articles to be the best. And Michael Kelly says, look, okay, we'll leave it there, but stick to the facts in future, okay? I don't need this again. But I'm willing to overlook it on these couple of occasions. But now what happens is other people around about, other journalists, they start to go, I've always thought there was something funny about Stephen Glass and his stories. How the hell is he always able to be right there where the action is happening? However, there's those whispers, there's those concerns, but does that in any way hold back Stephen Glass's career? It does. It fuck. No way, Jose. Stephen goes on to be employed by major publications. They're clambering to get him to write for them. Now in 1997, he's earning $50,000 as a freelance journalist. Well, gag me with a wooden spoon, to use an outdated phrase. Not bad. Not bad for someone who's actually fairly new to writing and, who there might be suspicions about slightly making things up. So here he is, he's 25, he's earning the big bucks. But let's just zoom out and see what's actually going on here. Stephen Glass is a liar. He's a liar and a manipulator. He's a massive, massive narcissist. What he's done really well here is he's created a sort of role for himself where, right, I'm not going to say the word victim. It's not really victim that I mean, but he's very, very, very good at playing a sort of underconfident and unsure version of himself. So if someone praises his articles, he'll do like a kind of, oh really? Oh, do you think it was good? Kind of vibe, right? Which just, bulk, just makes you want to be sick when people do that. And so you end up with this, people have a really strange time dealing with who he is as a human being, because some people are going, he's such a good writer, but isn't it a shame that he's so insecure in himself? But he's not. He's not at all insecure. It's all a fucking game. Basically, here's what Stephen Glass is doing. He's making up these articles. He is inventing people that don't exist. Companies, situations, all of these things, they're all a work of fiction. He then takes to stealing data from other people's articles and trying to pass it off as his own. During all of this time, he's very, very careful to still be everyone's friend. He still wants to be in amongst everything that's happening in the New Republic office. He'll still be the guy that goes and gets you a cup of coffee when you need it. He'll still be the person that listens to you if you're having a hard day. But it's all just manipulation. Now, there's about to be a big change that Stephen Glass does not see coming, and this is a really worrying change when it happens. His editor, Michael Kelly, will say of Stephen, he is potentially the most talented writer of his generation. What Michael Kelly is buying into is the idea that now there's talks of Stephen getting a Hollywood book deal. Talks of him writing for Hollywood TV shows without anyone knowing that he's a liar. And here's what's dangerous for Stephen is enter into the story a man called Chuck Lane. Now I think Maybe potentially if you're American you might know who Chuck Lane is. I think he's on TV quite a lot. Anyway, he was respected and regarded as a fantastic journalist. In the sort of early 90s he went out and he covered a lot of sort of war-torn countries and a lot of places where war was happening. And he, at the age of 36, which is young really to get this kind of position, he's given the job of editor of the New Republic. So he now essentially becomes Stephen's boss. Now, the difference between his new boss and his old boss is that Chuck Lane is a man of integrity. He's a man who demands honesty from his writers. You know, that's his whole thing about his own journalistic career, really, is that it has to be real, it has to come from the heart. And he's well aware of Stephen's work. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't really know any of these rumours that Stephen might be making things up or fabricating things or whatever. But, you know, he's keeping a close eye on all the writers. And for Stephen, this is a problem. Because, well, here's the issue. If you're a big liar, pants on fire, you are essentially fucked when a new boss comes in who's all about honesty and integrity. But for a little while, Stephen manages to go quite undetected. No one's really paying that close attention. Is there still gossip? Yeah, there is. Does some of this reach Chuck Lane? Yeah, it does. But, you know, often, we know this, I mean, you must get this in your workplace all the time. The occasional thing gets said about this person and that person here and there, and actually before you know it, quite often it just gets forgotten. I mean, I think if we've learned anything at all from the story of Anna Delvey that I told a while ago, it's that these rumours that people are fake, these rumours that people are not quite who they say they are or doing what they say they're doing, they can exist for a long, long time before anything actually happens. And that's kind of what's happening here in the case of Stephen. So back home, away from that world of these articles, what are his mum and dad thinking? Well, they're now looking at this journalistic career and they're going, right, okay, it's good, you have done really well, but we would still really like you to think about becoming a doctor or becoming a lawyer. And really what he wants is he wants his parents' approval. You know, he wants to please them. He's doing pure Marilyn Monroe vibes. I wanna be loved by you. And they're going, yeah, well, that's all well and good, but essentially you would really please us if you just picked the career we wanted for you. But he doesn't. He decides he's going to stick with journalism. So it's in 1998, Stephen decides he's been looking at a lot of things through his journalism. And there's a kind of rise at this time. God, it feels like so fucking long ago. But there's a rise of the internet. There's the rise of, well, not only social media, but, you know, companies like Amazon and all that were starting to emerge. And he wants to start to sort of get into that world of writing. He's quite interested in technology and sort of getting into that. So what he does is he starts to pay close attention to the idea of hacking. Again, remembering hacking was a fairly new concept. Like, I don't know if a lot of people were necessarily talking about what hacking is. So he writes this piece, and it's called Hack Heaven. And in this piece, he describes a 15-year-old boy who is a hacker. And he describes that he goes to an event where he watches this 15-year-old boy sit across the table from a company called Juked Micronics. No, how do you say it? Hello? Juked Micronics. Easy for you to say. So he's got this 15-year-old boy. He's got this company whose name I'm not going to try and say again. And this is what he describes in the article. He says, I watched this 15-year-old boy literally say to this organisation, I will bring you down. because I have hacked into your systems and I have found things like wage slips, I've found details of secret meetings, I've actually gone in to the personal files on the computers of your employees and I've got nude photographs of everyone. So this 15-year-old is saying, if you don't pay me millions, I'm going to leak all of this information. I mean, shock a fucking Rama if it was true, but it's not. The 15-year-old hacker does not exist. The company, Jukt Micronics, don't exist. In this article, he goes on to claim that this company are so scared by this young hacker that they hire him to work for them. And it's just a big load of bollocks. That's all it is. Now, when this lands in the office, this expose on this corrupt 15-year-old who's bringing down organisations, the magazine are like, holy moly, knock me over with a feather. This piece is dynamite. This is excellent. This is just absolutely excellent. I mean, the sheer balls he has to just walk in there with a fake piece and go, oh, you're never going to believe it. And people do believe it. It's absolutely insane. And the article is published. Now, what happens is this. It gets published. New Republic gets a lot of like other press attention and people going, wow, because it's great. They've really been able to sort of, get deep into an issue. But other journalists start going, that doesn't make sense. I've never heard of Jukt Micronics or whatever it's called. Never heard of this company. Do they really exist? What's going on? And people decide they're going to come together, journalists, and they're going to try and kind of bring Stephen Glass down a bit. What they're going to try and do here is actually expose that he is lying. I mean, we're talking about a sort of vigilante group of journalists who are looking at a lot of his articles and going, where's the proof that any of these things ever existed? Where's the proof that any of these people ever existed? And they're looking for that proof. But I can tell you now, they're on to plums because it just doesn't exist. These journalists, what they do is they go to Chuck Lane and they say, look, we don't think this is right. Something's wrong here. Like, let's take this last article, this one about hacking. Nah, we can't find that company. We can't find the 15-year-old boy that he's talking about. And this supposed event that he went to, we can't find any evidence of that either. Now, this is where it gets slightly weirder. Stephen Glass hears that there are journalists who are trying to fact check some of his information, and he panics. And during this panic, Chuck Lane receives emails from Jukt Micronics, and he receives emails from the 15-year-old hacker. And so Chuck Lane's able to say, well, I've had communication with two of the people they talked about in the article, so they are these people do exist. And these journalists say, no, like what we think's happening is Stephen Glass is just making them up. He's the one emailing you, pretending to be these companies, pretending to be the subject of the articles, but they don't exist. He's just plucked them out of his imagination. So there follows then this kind of meeting with these journalists, trying to prove that he's a big liar, Chuck Lane trying to kind of defend his employee, and it's in the meeting Stephen does his absolute best to uphold that no, he's telling the truth and he's not lying and he's not making these things, but it's Chuck Lane's kind of looking at this point and starting to lose a hell of a lot of faith in him. He's really beginning to say, I don't think you're telling me the absolute God's honest truth here. But Chuck is willing to sort of give him the benefit of the doubt. So what he says is, look, right, if you're saying that this meeting happened and you were there and you saw this 15-year-old trying to bring down this company, take me to where the meeting happened. And that'll put an end to it. Stephen Glass doesn't really see this coming, so he has to think fast. And he goes, okay, fine. I'll take you to the hotel where it happened. So they get to the hotel. And Chuck Lane says, I just need to check about an event that was meant to have happened last month on this date, blah, 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 blah. And the hotel say, what? Oh no, we've never heard of that event. That never happened. And now Stephen Glass will say, because he's a manipulator and a narcissist, he'll say, okay, fine. Actually, there wasn't an event, right? The event never happened, but what did happen was I spoke to all these people on the phone. And Chuck Lane says, okay, but that's really fucking problematic because you wrote in the article that you attended an event and these people were there in the flesh. Now you're telling me it was all on the phone. And Stephen Glass is like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. And actually, Stephen Glass then starts to say, I think I've been tricked by them all. I mean, I think this is all just about a game someone has played with me here. Alright, mate. Chuck Lane then begins to go through all of Stephen's articles, everything that he's written for the magazine, and he starts demanding of Stephen, is this true? Tell me what is true and what isn't. What have you embellished? What have you just made up? And Stephen is trying to cling on to it all being true. He'll say, yeah, okay, I might have added the odd detail here and there, but really, it's all true. Chuck Lane goes about his own investigation here. And he starts way back at the beginning. Remember the taxi piece that I told you about? Remember I said that the success of that piece was because of that character, that Murdoch character that we heard about, that Stephen Glass made us care so much about. Yeah, that guy never existed. In fact, for writing that piece, Stephen Glass never set foot in a taxi. He wrote the entire thing at a computer. He never did any of that research that he said he did. And this continues, and it continues as other journalists and as Chuck Lane get deeper and deeper into it. They discover that 28 of the 40 articles that Stephen Glass had published for the New Republic magazine were entirely works of fiction, and that they had built so much of what their magazine was about around his writing, and not a word of it was true. When they looked really, really closely at this last piece, this one about the hackers, Chuck Lane tried to see if Jucked Micronics had a website, and he discovered that they do have a website. So he went onto it, he looked at it, but he looked at it and he thought, that looks a bit rubbish. It looks a bit amateur, essentially. So, but there was a phone number on it. So we thought, I'm going to call the number and I'm just going to check if there is someone at this company. Now here's what's weird. If we've said that this whole thing has been made up, how come Chuck Lane, when he phones Jucked Micronics, how come he's actually able to speak to the CEO? How come there's a CEO on the other end of the phone who will say, yeah, we were being threatened by a hacker? This really makes Chuck Lane stop and think. Because he's now essentially going, well, I'm calling this guy a huge liar, but actually, I've been able to speak to someone. What's that about? So Chuck Lane digs deeper. He gets other people to help him dig deeper, and when they actually manage to trace down where this website was created and where that call was made from, it's discovered that this was actually Stephen Glass's brother on the end of the phone. Stephen Glass had got his brother to pretend to be the CEO of a major company, just in case his boss called to check out the facts. The website had been made by Stephen himself. And so at this point, Chuck Lane has just had enough. He suspends Stephen for 2 years. Doesn't want him writing anymore. So Stephen is suspended. He's gone. A lot of the other journalists feel validated because they're like, well, we always said there was something a bit dodge about him, and now I'm actually quite validated. What Stephen does is he sneaks back in to the offices to try and delete some other files that he has on his computer, but he gets caught and quickly thrown out. Chuck Lane, at this point, somewhere into Stephen's suspension, just keeps unearthing more and more fakeness from over the years, and eventually he just loses the plot and he fires Stephen Glass. A sort of task force of journalists come in and they scan everything that he's ever written, and just the sheer amount of things that the man invented are unbelievable. But what's even crazier is people just took them as fact. You know, he invented companies, he invented organisations, he invented events. None of it was true, and nobody batted an eyelid at the time. People just assumed this was the truth. Now here's the weird thing, is I thought when I was researching this story, I would got to this point and I thought, well, do you know what's going to happen is he's going to have to face charges for that, or there's going to be some massive fine. And really, annoyingly, there isn't. He doesn't actually face any criminal activity. He just has to accept that for him, it's all over. His $50,000 a year that he's been making, that's done. That's finished. So here he is, he's 28 years old. He's been absolutely publicly shamed by huge journalists, huge editors. There is not a chance now that any publication is going to take Stephen Glass back and let them work with him. So at 28 he goes back to live with his parents. And it's here that his parents actually get what they want. They encourage him to now forget all about the journalistic side of things and instead become a lawyer. And so that's what he does. He enrolls at a university in New York and begins to study law. But this is tricky for Stephen, because although he does pass the bar, no company is willing to take Stephen Glass on, because this has been a big scandal. And these companies, they know his name and his murky past and his lying, and it's always going to hold him back from getting into a really good law firm. Eventually, what happens is there is a firm in California, and they take him on and they give him a little sort of role within that. This is what's mental about the role that he gets, right? This is what I just think is crazy. He gets this role where what he does is, if someone is going to go to court and they've got a sort of story to tell in court, it's Stephen Glass's job to sit with that person and basically help them craft their story that they're going to tell in court. Now, I know that happens, right? I know that every law firm will, if they're putting a witness on the stand or they're putting someone up, will say, okay, they need a bit of coaching to just make sure that they're hitting all the right points, they're telling the story clearly and accurately. But it's Stephen Glass's job to sort of almost slightly secretly work with these people. And of course, what that does is it just raises the question, oh, alright, so what he's actually doing is working with people to embellish the story that they're going to tell in court. And he will say, no, I'm not embellishing anything, I'm not adding details. And it's like, well, how much can you believe that, really? How much can you believe that he's not doing that, given his past? Anyway, those who know Stephen Glass, and who's, now in his 40s, sort of late 40s, will say he's become a bit of a shadow of himself, definitely a smaller version of himself, and he continues to live in California with his girlfriend. He doesn't want any kind of publicity around what happened to him when he was at the height of his journalistic career. He will say this: "My life was a long period of lying, and I had to create more lies to cover up the original lies. It was a mess, and I can't go back, and I can't change that." And so here, I guess, is the thing to take. When you hear a story, it's worth weighing up for yourself how much of it you believe. And so ends the story. Alrighty, well, hope you enjoyed that. What a big liar. What a major just big lie face. You're telling lots of lies. Alright, okay. So I'm going to give you the top 5, talking of lies, the statements that you have been sending to me that you are trying to tell me that people actually say and clearly they're not true. In at number 5, Rebecca Tubridy says, "Face like a dropped pie." No. No, Rebecca, no. Claire Palermo, "You tune me rough, I'll file you smooth." Claire, have you just invented that? Because, what? Patty Thompson, "You bet your sweet bippy." What are you talking about? Oh. Di Rayner, "Far out, Brussels sprout." I mean, I think you've just taken words that rhyme. Okay. And I'm going to end with this one. Melissa Turner, "Do you want egg in your beer?" Melissa, I couldn't even attempt to guess what that even means. So, anyway, if you want to, you can keep sending me your fake phrases, and I will try to find ways to use them. Okay, right, well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Until the next time I speak to you all, be well, be safe, okay? Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face, let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over. Let's get it on, let's do it, let's get it over.